Today I'm going to talk about real estate law and some of its ethical implications. So, just to start off with, I'm going to talk about basically what is real estate law. Real estate law is the area of the law that governs buying, using, and selling land. It's the law that governs how people acquire property and what they can do with the property they own. Real estate law is also called property law. State laws are the primary source. There's not in most aspects of law, there's the state law and then federal law kind of covers everything. With real estate law, it's basically state laws are the primary law. There are some federal laws and guidelines that states have to follow, but for the most part, it's state to state, which is part of why getting a real estate license is important because it gives you a focus on the area that you will be serving. It's not so much about knowing a broad spectrum. You need to know your area, your laws, and regulations. Ethical housing. That is something that is in the forefront of the news nowadays. We are in a time right now where there's, in some areas, there are areas that housing isn't so scarce, but a big problem right now is housing. There's not enough of it, and what there is too expensive. For example, in California, there's well over 100,000. I mean, that changes day to day, so it's possibly up to 150, 200,000 people are homeless now, just due to rent prices increasing drastically faster than the pay rate. If your housing goes up $500 a month, but your pay doesn't, you're probably not gonna be able to afford it. So people used to look at homeless as well, they must be on drugs or they made bad decisions. There's a lot of cases now where people are homeless to no fault of their own. They just they have rent and it goes up twice as much as it is. So that's becoming a problem. So we need to look at what can be done and are there ethical real estate practices going on allowing this surge in pricing. In Berkeley, California, they came up with the first refusal and right to purchase policy. What that is let's say you're living in a house, the rent doubles. You will have the first right to either refuse that or purchase the property. If you're able to purchase the property, then you're able to do that instead of getting kicked out. The mayor said that there are growing inequities in the rental market born of speculation and, as I was talking about with ethics, greed. He wants to have a level playing field. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. There's going to be a lot of people fighting that, and there's just as good of a chance that it's going to get knocked down. But it's good to see some government officials not only realizing what's happening, but taking steps to fix that. The next slide here is going to be about who is responsible for ethical practices. When it comes to real estate, again, it's state to state. So there isn't a federal agency overseeing what's being done. Something I found was the National Association of Realtors. Now, you don't have to be a part of them. So, again, it's not like, let's say, a bank. A bank has to follow federal guidelines. These realtors still just have to go state to state. So the NAR, as they call the National Association of Realtors, has its own code of ethics and standards. Just to kind of summarize that, the realtors have an obligation to do what's best for the customer and the nation. In the NAR's code of ethics, it actually says patriotic duty, which I found interesting. But again, the problem is this is a code of ethics, not a law or regulation. So it's obvious that, like with the housing crisis, that was not taking place. People were giving loans out they shouldn't have, and it hurt the country. So Is it good to have a code of ethics? Yes, but if there's no enforcement, it kind of holds no weight. You'd like to think people do the right thing, but as history shows, that is not usually the case. People do what they have to make money, and that ethics kind of go out the window sometimes with that. Um, Basically, in the end, I think that it's going to come down to the elected officials putting their foot down, putting rules in place, and by rules, obviously, I mean laws and regulations in place just to keep these families reasonably housed. The price has gone up the way they are. I honestly think that's the only way it's going to happen. We can't just put a code of ethics out there and hope that people do what they're supposed to. But again, that would be nice. Let's see, the global real estate ethics. That is another big one. It's big because certain areas have cultural things that, you know, if you're born into money, you're allowed to have a house. Some people aren't. Um, Also, for people from outside of the countries, like for example, here in my slide, property developers, for international real estate investors and construction companies that work outside U.S. borders all face ethical dilemmas for paying wages for a day's work. So, let's say you're a U.S. company and you're developing in a third world country. Um, there's a certain amount of ethics that goes into deciding how to pay somebody. Do you pay them as much as you would if it was in the U.S., or do you pay them what they're getting paid there? Or if there's really nobody watching and regulating the pay, sorry, in that country, people can get away with not paying or putting people in bad living situations. So you really need to be able to have those ethics in place, those rules, regulations to require people to do what's right, just like in the last slide. In dealing in global real estate, there are many factors to consider. Like I mentioned earlier, cultural compatibility, workplace safety, cross cultural dilemmas, such as what I was talking about earlier with the pays or the living areas. Those are all things that in time can build up. They might think, oh, it's okay if we do less pay, or it's not important if we care about their housing. But as time goes on, you could very easily be giving somebody a bad living situation, which is not what most companies are trying to do. Um, it's a tough deal when it deals with global. There's not, like the UN, for example, they don't necessarily track real estate. So you could be just building whatever you want, wherever you want, and there's kind of nobody there to keep track of what's happening. Now, at the local government levels, yes, but globally, no. For my next slide, we're going to talk. We're going to talk about real estate protections. This is important, as we saw in 2008. In real estate, there does need to be protections for different categories of people. You would not think that's still the case, but it is. Um, you know, you can't be renting out a property. You can't have a property for sale. Somebody comes to look at it, and if they qualify financially, you can't just say, I don't like your lifestyle, I don't like how you live, you can't have this house. It's unfortunate that we have to have laws like that in place, but it's good that we do. For example, in Virginia, they just passed one that prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation, and the newest one is gender identity. And status as a veteran, but that's been around for a while. But the gender identity is a big one. You can't just decide that you don't like what somebody thinks about themselves and bar them from getting a house. So these are the real estate protections that are needed, unfortunately, but are good to have. So going again over what I just said, it bars discrimination in private employment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, age, veteran status, national origin or pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. These are all very important things to protect. If somebody qualifies financially for a house and they can responsibly afford it, you can't stop them from living there. Now, when it comes to land ethics, what that means is how do we justify the usage of the land in the real estate dealings? Um, you can kind of tell in some cities, some crowded areas, and pollution that it's not always been that important. You know, a lot of places have just let people build and build and build with no repercussions. An example that comes to mind is Houston. Um, there is a portion of the problem being climate change, but they've built so much with zero zoning that there's too much concrete, which sounds funny, but there is. There's too much concrete. There's nowhere for the water to absorb. And that is part of what's giving them their intense flooding problem. So a lot of people say it's my land, I should be able to build what I want. But then you end up with a city like Houston that just floods like crazy. Um, the areas before their reservoirs used to be farmland, and that would absorb the water and wouldn't overburden the reservoirs. But that's what's happening now. So as land, and also as land becomes scarcer and pollution rises, that's gonna be a leading issue with real estate. The conversation has continued to evolve as we see firsthand the impacts humanity can have while meeting individual and societal needs. I thought that was an interesting sentence because we are seeing firsthand what's happening. It's not a theoretical statement, it's talking about what's happened. It's almost a historical statement, if you will. So, in conclusion, I think that ethics are vital to real estate law, almost as much as they are when it comes to housing and the economy. I think it's just, it affects almost, real estate affects, as we saw in '08 again, we saw how it affects every aspect of our life. So if we don't keep ethics within real estate law, we can crush a country again. Um, with all that said, we as consumers have a great responsibility to not just be careful what we are doing, but to vote for people who want what's best for us. Thank you very much.